Folks, thank you all for joining us today. We're here at the home of Mr. Bill Hellen, up here in the Medina County area, but that's not where he's from. This is home now, but Bill's an old South Texas rancher and ranch historian and has a whole lot to say, and I'm glad you're with us today to enjoy his stories, because he's a wealth of information with historical knowledge of all of South Texas and the cattle industry and whatnot. And Mr. Hellen, thank you for having us in your home. I really appreciate it, and we can't wait to hear about your history.
Thank you, Mark. I'm glad you came. It's a pleasure having you guys here.
Thank you very much.
Well, I do enjoy stories about South Texas. I fancy myself as a ranch historian, amateur historian. I'm very well read. I enjoyed history with some of the courses I enjoyed in high school and college. But
and you not only studied it, but you lived it. That's the important part.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah, anytime I can catch a cattleman, I'll take him to the side. I'll interview him, just like you are.
Yeah,
to find out his stories.
That's how we learn. Yeah.
I went on.
What's the history of your family?
Well, thank you for asking. I guess that's kind of like how I got started. My grandfather, Charles Waugh Hellen, was raised in around the White House there in Washington, D.C. His father passed away just before he was born, so he never knew his father, whose name was Charles Washington Hellen. So he lived with his mother, his older sister, and a younger brother.
About what time would that be? What year?
He was born in 1876, so you're talking about the 1880 in that area there.
All right.
At the age 5 years of age, he was run over by a horse-drawn streetcar that ran out. Horses went berserk or something, and believe it or not, we even had a little newspaper clipping. It's in our archives back at the ranch. Castigating an editorial castigating the drivers for being so careless. Oh, that was interesting.
Wow. Yeah.
Anyway, Charlie lost his leg. He lost his right leg, and he was a sickly young man all this time. And his mother, her name was Hadassah, but she was known as Desi, and Hadassah had kept contact with a cousin of hers who was a true Texas pioneer named William A. Wall, W-A-U-G-H, and she named her son Charlie after they ended up calling him Uncle Will. Okay. So named it after him. And Uncle Will had a very interesting history. He and his father, who was a doctor, came through Brownsville on their way to the gold fields in 1849, went on out to California. I don't know what route they took, I guess through Mexico, Arizona, etc., and were very successful, made money. Whether it was in gold or not, I have no idea. But the story is that Will, when they came back to Brownsville, and his father died in one of the yellow fever epidemics or something. The doctor who was treating people, and he died. And Will was there, a young man. I'm thinking probably in his early 20s. I don't know for sure. But Will liked South Texas, and he liked the people in South Texas. And so he began his business of buying and selling cattle and livestock and pretty much anything he could do. And this is in the era when the big operators like the steamboat operators, Captain King and others started acquiring land. Well, Uncle Will wasn't acquiring land at that time, but he had relatives, and he of workers and stuff, and so he started trading cattle. Anyway, by the 1880s, late 1880s, by then Hebbronville the railroad had come through what is now Hebbronville, the Tex-Mex Railway, in 1881, and by 1883, Uncle Will and some nephews of his ended up buying the El Sordo Ranch, which is 25,000 acres, Spanish land grant. He didn't buy it from the grantee; he bought it from whoever else he acquired it from, and Uncle Will began ranching that, and so by 1894, Hadassah had kept in contact with him, and my grandfather didn't weigh 100 pounds, and he was 17 years old and sickly, had all the signs of tuberculosis that his father had died of. It was just a generally unhealthy climate, and so in fact, tuberculosis in those years. You've read about it during the Civil War, terrible things. That was the White Death, from what they would cough up. And so anyway, Charlie still hadn't gained any weight. Hadassah was worried about him. So in her correspondence with Uncle Will, he told her that the people in South Texas were very healthy, and that if they started getting evidence of respiratory problems, all they did was hang around the goat pens a lot with that acrid dust, and because at that time every ranch had large goat herds in there, and that acrid dust, for some reason, they decided was what helped cure that whatever that issue was that caused the terrible tuberculosis. And so Charlie moved. He and his sister came. We have a story that he wrote about it in a book that my sister and I compiled about our grandfather and grandmother. And so sure enough, he became a healthy, strapping young man there, and got into the cattle business. His mother, he loved what Uncle Will was doing, and the nephews buying and selling Mustang horses and cattle from the Mexican ranchers up and down all around the country there. And so he loved doing that, and he sold his mother. He said he thinks I'm going to stay here, and his mother sent him $300, mailed it to a bank in Laredo, in Laredo, Texas, and so he began cashing in on that and buying and selling cattle there.
Interesting. Did they live on El Sordo, the ranch?
They lived next door. Interestingly enough, Uncle Will, it turns out, had never made a payment on that. He financed it with some English investors that were loaning money on land in those times, and there was one of the major companies, I can't think of the name of it right now, that would go around lending money on land, and Uncle Will, they had hard times at that time. They overgrazed pastures and drought and all the terrible things. This was all prairie, and there was no water in there. There wasn't surface water in that country. That was a major limitation. And if it rained, the lagunas would have water, but it didn't take long for them to dry up. So anyway, bottom line is Charlie got into that and bought a few head of cattle, and we have the story about it that he wrote about it later, and had one of the local cattlemen, Martinez, helped him buy some cattle down on the border in San Ignacio. We got a lot of good little stories that he told about his hat blowing off. He bought him a hat and a guitar at Rondado. There wasn't any Hebbronville at the time. Pena Station was there, where the railroad had come through. But he told interesting stories about having a pet crow. He was a lonely boy, but he kept a diary. His mother insisted he keep a diary. So we have that diary, and my sister transcribed it. It was a wonderful resource.
That is really neat.
Yes, and we put that in the book that we compiled about him.
Great.
But by 1899 came the worst freeze that had ever been seen in this country. It got down to 6 degrees and stayed there for 4 or 5 days. And all the cattle, every freeze came along with a drought, of course, like now, bad times. And all his cattle died. He lost all his cattle, lost all his investment, and was whipped and went back to CW, went back to Washington, D.C., whipped. An old gentleman, an old cattle trader, cattleman named H.C. Yeager, Heinrich C. Yeager, had taken my grandfather under his wing. He admired him as an enterprising young man who would right away wanted a job to water the stage horses there at the Sordo.
Because he had one leg, so there was only so
one
much
leg,
he could do, right?
one leg, crutches, used crutches all his life. I've got his saddle over there with a pair of crutches strapped to it.
Oh, wow.
You'll see.
Yeah, that's great.
Some of his crutches. Anyway, Mr. Yeager told Charlie, who he liked as an enterprising young man, if you'll get a little learning, do a little accounting business, come back and we'll go into business. I'll go into business with you. And Charlie had leased 8 sections, 5,200 acres of state land, unwatered state land from the General Land Office. And so Charlie had leased that 7 cents a year for 10 years. And I've been to the General Land Office in Austin and looked it up and found the copies of those leases. Everything's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was dead broke by 1899, and he was whipped, and he had to default on his lease, and that's when Mr. Yeager. It was a nice piece of land. Mr. Yeager couldn't take it up because the state had limits on how much land you could take up.
I see.
And you had requirements, kind of like homestead. You had to fence it, and you had to put a water source on it. You had to do something with it,
Right.
if they were going to let you lease it at that price.
Okay.
And so Mr. Yeager told him to get a little studying, a little learning, and come back. I'll go and we'll re-up your lease. And so they did. By 1907, they were doing pretty darn good, buying and selling. I had some of his books in our archives that he would keep, detailed books where they would loan money to some of the vaquero families, that trustworthy families that needed to borrow $1 or $2 or something like that.
Sure.
Small amounts. They'd make a payment of 10 cents or something, or a goat hide. That was interesting because at Pena, there was a mercantile store and you could sell them horsehair, deer hides, goat hides, cattle hides, of course.
Which is present-day Hebbronville?
Yes.
Pena?
Pena was just, you mentioned knowing Brian, Vogt. This is exactly across the railroad, behind the Balderas Ranch there, where Brian is.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. That's half a mile from Hebbronville, where the shipping pens were later built and then turned down, went there. And that's where Mr. Jones, where Brian is where Mr. Jones built his shipping pens on the Tex-Mex.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's neat.
But that's, anyway, that was Pena Station and the mercantile store there. A while ago, I mentioned Tony Salinas, and the Salinas is related to the people, the old timers that had those mercantile stores there.
Oh, wow.
Tony Salinas was a staunch Republican, and he's the one that brought George H.W. Bush down, and my brother Chris donated one of his beautiful bronzes to.
Right.
We've mentioned that before.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's kind of part of the story there.
It is.
Yeah, the bottom line is, by 1907, they had done pretty well with their little money lending and cattle trading and all the enterprises that you could do in a frontier area that just now developing, and that had a railroad through it. But that's one of the keys, transportation, and so they decided to divide up, and so Mr. Yeager kept half of it, and the Yeager, and then the Armstrong family, who were related, my close friend Frank Armstrong, that was their lower pasture, and then ours, La Mota Ranch. La Mota Ranch, there was 4 sections that C.W. Hellen we kept, or our original. Those 4 sections are in our heart. There, that's La Mota Ranch.
And that's back over at Rendell.
At La Mota Ranch headquarters. It's a few miles from Rondado. That's
Got
right.
you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a few miles from Rondado. But that's kind of the story of C.W. Hellen. And by 1911, he and Mr. Yeager, the town was building up. That lumber yards were being built, and a lot of the bigger ranches were started to be divided up. You've heard of the Fowler brothers, who divided up Fowlerton. Well, they bought a big tract of land in Hogg County there. In later years, it was acquired by W.W. Jones, who became part of the great Jones ranches. But anyway, the Fowler brothers had ranches there divided.
Yeah, I never knew that. I knew about all their stuff up at Fowlerton, but I didn't know they were involved.
They bought tracts of land just as people do nowadays. Buy a ranch, subdivide it, and anyway, that brought a lot of the pioneers to Hebbronville. The old families came to Hebbronville to take up some of that land at a lower, pretty good price.
Right.
And but anyway, so they were doing pretty well, and the town needed a bank. So Mr. Yeager and my grandfather and other community leaders went together, put together $25,000 of capital, and formed the Hebbronville State Bank at that time. And so my grandfather worked at that bank all his life. Passed away in around 1960 or so, 60, 61, I believe, and he was instrumental in founding the bank. All of the old names of Hogg County you'll recognize: the Easts and the Jones and the Yeagers and Armstrongs and the Martinezes and the Gonzaleses, and all of those folks were all instrumental in forming this den. We have the original yellow pad that my grandfather was using when he wrote down who had pledged,
Right.
And my grandfather, I didn't say why he liked to stay in South Texas. He wanted to stay, is because they didn't treat the Mexican ranch people. They weren't called Mexican American at that time. They were Mexican.
Sure.
And they didn't differentiate people like
Right.
politicians do nowadays.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, they were their heritage were Mexican and spoke Spanish, and which so my grandfather, one of the reasons he ended up liking it, because they didn't treat my grandfather like a cripple, like a useless cripple. Whereas back in Washington, somebody like that, they would have called him Stumpy or something like that,
Right.
something like that, like a useless cripple. They treated him like with respect. Anybody else, and he worked his butt off, to earn that respect.
Yeah, the old Mexican culture just wasn't that way. Just very, very respectful.
Absolutely, they were respectful. Those ranch people were kind and respectful, and still are. Those folks,
Right.
And so there at the Sordo, there at the Sordo, he decided he liked it, and they even gave him a sobrenombre, which is a nickname. Which is if those folks really like you, they gave you a nickname, and they called him Chale el Cojo. Cojo means lame in the hind foot to an animal. You talk about a mare, esa yegua está coja. Coja. Somebody they understand right away that she's lame in the back leg. Well, Chale el Cojo, he's Cojo. And Coco means he's just a little lame, right? He's not stumpy, right? He's just a little cripple.
Right.
And see, kindness, right?
Sure.
And he liked that. And when my sister and I compiled our book here about him, we named it El Cojo.
El Cojo.
El Cojo. Kogo is how it's spelled.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's the thing. They liked it. But anyway, my grandfather ended up banking there, and so his whole career was in banking and ranching. And he wasn't a large rancher. He was like many of the other cattlemen around there, went up and down, in sizes of acreage and number of cattle and things like that. In the 1936 Centennial Book of Brands that they had when the Texas Centennial was in Fort Worth or Dallas, wherever it was, they made a book of the brands, and the good story that he wrote about his brand. He said he had acquired by 1936 16,000 acres, and there, to him, you got to understand. He was a one-legged 17-year-old boy with nothing, So that's pretty good. He had a lot of chances to acquire and go into debt and acquire some very large ranches.
Right.
That wasn't his style. He would buy what he could afford. So.
Right. Rather than borrowing money,
That's right. He if he borrowed money, he kept good records. In fact, Mr. Yeager helped him over the years. Mr. Yeager was a prominent cattleman.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to go back and say about Mr. Yeager. Mr. Yeager was Uncle Will Wall's son-in-law. Mr. Yeager, Heinrich C. Okay. He was his son-in-law, and by way in the early days before my grandfather came, Uncle Will had settled on the up at what is now Dull, Texas. I don't know if you know where Dull is, close to Fowlerton.
Okay.
Yeah, in McMullen County.
Yeah. And
he had he had settled his ranch up there, and his son-in-law married one of his daughters. One of his 4 daughters was H.C. Yeager, a young cattleman, and Mr. Uncle Will would buy cattle in South Texas, and H.C. Yeager would drive them up north after the Civil War.
Okay.
And after the Civil War, he would a trail drive and told many stories to my Uncle Dana about his interesting time through the Indian territories and all of that.
Yeah.
So H.C. Yeager was a true pioneer of our area there, Texas pioneer. My grandfather adored him, and he helped my grandfather a lot.
I'm sure. I mean, can you imagine when your grandfather went home to Washington?
Yeah.
If Mr. Yeager hadn't reached out to him and brought him back, you wouldn't have the history you have today.
We would not be there. That's right. That's our history. That's our history. My grandfather ended up, interestingly enough, he had 2 sons. Had my Uncle Dana. Uncle Dana would have been born about 1915, about 1912 or 13. And my dad was born in 1919, and all born in Laredo, Texas.
And what's your dad's full name?
Charles. He was Junior. Charles Wall Hellen Jr.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and I'm Charles William Hellen. I'm C.W. Hellen also, but I'm Charles William Hellen, known as Bill, of course,
with a different middle name.
Yes, gotcha. But yes. So my dad and Uncle Dana, when my grandfather passed away, in those years, they didn't do much preparation for a government confiscation by they call it inheritance taxes, right? That's confiscation of what you've earned.
Yes, sir.
That's things my grandfather wouldn't have ever thought that our own government would do to you. But anyway, they had made preparation for that, and he just left everything to his wife, what he had, and Uncle Dana and Dad bought out their mother, borrowed money, bought out their mother, and then divided the ranch, and in lease country and owned country, each one of my Uncle Dana and Dad each ranched about 10,000 acres on there, counting some lease country, and that divided that up. That's how I've I've many a story about I know I can about them acquiring that and everything.
Sure,
but
and not contiguous, right? The acreage is spread out a little bit in a couple of pieces.
That's right. See, my grandfather, one of the tracts that my grandfather bought, very interesting, was we call it the Schoolland pasture, is what he called it. Well, Mr. Jones, W. Jones, major investor and cattleman of the county and of South Texas, W. Jones, the original patriarch of their family, had purchased a defaulted on note that Archie Parr, the old senator from Duval County, had sold Mr. Jones a defaulted note on some of their Duval County school lands. Mm-hmm. You may be aware that Texas didn't have any money, but they would give land, vacant lands, to the different counties to fund the schools or the mental institutions and the blind.
That stuff spread around a good area of South Texas.
So it was a league of land, 4,428 acres, one league of land. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Jones knew that my who was on the board, who was a stockholder in our bank, not on the board. There was his son Dick Jones, not our little Dick. Our little Dick's grandfather, and then with Dick, old Dick Jones. Anyway, was an officer in our bank also. But anyway, my grandfather ended up buying that piece of land from Mr. Jones, 4,428 acres, pure prairie, no water anyway. It would be between, you would want to say it was between Hebbronville and toward Bruni, in that direction. There, I see. Open land. Mm-hmm. And Duval County school land. But Mr. Yeager, he went to Mr. Yeager, who is his advisor, and say, Henry, Mr. Jones wants to sell me that piece of land, and he'll finance it for me. And so he wants $3 an acre for that land, 4,428 acres, just open prairie, and he'll take $1 an acre a year for 3 years, and it'll be mine. And so Mr. Yeager says to this young man, young cattleman, young banker and cattleman, said, Get it in writing, Get it in writing. And where is it? Well, it's Duval County. He said, well, let me tell you what. You get those two big shots, and you get them to change the county line and put that in Hogg County, and you can do the deal. Well, I'll be darned. He went to Mr. Jones, and Mr. Jones got hold of Archie Parr, who was a state senator.
Right.
And they had put a bill before Congress, and they changed the county lines. And if you've ever been on 359 going toward Laredo from Hebbronville, sure, where Green Hill Cemetery is, that's the corner of the pasture, because my grandfather donated that corner of that 4,428 acres to the community. And that's where he's buried.
My grandparents are buried right there.
That's right,
Green
they
Hill
are.
Cemetery.
That's right. That's the corner of the land, and the county line, is now the far west fence line.
Wow!
You see,
I never knew that.
The Webb County line.
Sure.
No, the Duval County line.
Duval.
And then it's just a strip in there, and then it's Webb County.
So that's where that
Webb,
odd shape.
Webb and Jim Hogg and Duval all come together right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So anyway, it's an interesting story, isn't it?
That is really interesting.
And I know in my grandfather's safety deposit bag, he would have those little bitty receipts that Mr. Jones's office or Mr. Jones would give him when he made that payment. That hard to make that payment, cash.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There just wasn't cash in the country way back in those days,
Of course, right.
It wasn't money. There wasn't money. Man. Anyway, but that's an interesting story of that. And my Uncle Dana is the one that ended up ranching that. And he did with that. And then my dad ended up with what we call the home ranch, which is the Bonito Ranch. Mm-hmm. And Uncle Dana had the school land and some other lands that he acquired around there. And then they divided some land at the Mota that Uncle Dana took two sections of the original four, 1895. I may not have said that. In 1895 is when my grandfather leased that and registered his brand in Starr County. At that time, it was Starr County. So anyway, that's kind of our history.
Yeah.
My dad Uncle Dana was a businessman, already successful businessman, ranched various ranches on his own when World War II came around. And then my grandfather was on the community leader, was on the draft board, and he had no choice but to draft his two sons for the war, 1841. And Dad quickly got married, and Uncle Dana quickly got married, and then they were drafted, and they went into that left my grandfather. They left my grandfather, one-legged older man, in his 60s already, an elderly man, just without much help on his ranch. My grandfather had a prized herd of Hereford cattle. He just, on all his ranch, on all his three places, his part of the Mota, because he acquired more land there, and then what we call the home ranch, which is El Bonito, and the school land. Yeah.
You just don't see purebred Herefords in South Texas anymore.
Not anymore. And I got a video that with Ernest Armstrong, Mr. Armstrong had done in 1941, that video of that deal. And I showed it at the bank meeting one day, and Dick Jones just shook his head. He said, that brings back so many memories, so many memories, because the Jones were famous for their Hereford cattle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Send tens of thousands of them up to Oklahoma, grazing, Kansas, and all that.
As a little boy, all I remember about the Herefords was pink eye.
Yeah,
just fighting.
Well, that's right. They had their problems, but they could walk. They could walk to get water.
Right.
They would walk.
Very interesting.
Yeah, but anyway, that's the story of our lands there, mm-hmm. And Uncle Dana. They unfortunately we Charlotte and I and Charlotte's my sister. My brother had passed away in 2009, about the same year my mother did. One of the tragedies of our family were the multiple sclerosis my brother acquired. And young man, he was going to be the cattleman of the family. But anyway, my sister and I and my parents, we encouraged my father before he came ill. We encouraged him to let's keep this ranch together. Let's form an entity, that keep it together. And we did work it out to a family limited partnership. So my sister and I are the general partners, and we fiercely are protecting the acreage that we have. Mm-hmm. We operate about half my grandfather's original lands,
right,
on there, and our strategy is I divided it. I worked with NRCS in conservation programs, and we divided it into 4 grazing units, and then so four different family members are able to live the lifestyle, the South Texas ranching lifestyle, like my mother and dad did. But
I see.
each of us have 40, 50 cows,
Right.
and don't have to depend on it for they don't have to depend on it for
So the whole ranch is one piece, but you each operate separate.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Through the NRCS program, we cross-fenced, extensive cross-fencing and water distribution
Yes, sir.
to where there would be 4 ranchitos, you might say.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, the whole ranch itself would be a ranchito compared to Dick Jones. His house pasture is about the size of our whole ranch.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, but we're not embarrassed of that. We got a history. We're not trying to be a big gods. We got as many or more stories than those guys have. I'll tell you that. Yeah.
Yeah, with history like that, you're rich already.
We're rich. We're rich in history. We sure are.
Man, that is great.
Yeah, that's kind of how for our lands. I know people are interested in our ranch and our interests, and people don't understand whether we're a big old ranch or not. They treat us, but we do live the lifestyle of someone, whether we had a lot of country or not, and it's a beautiful thing to do.
Yeah.
In my case, I had a young cowboy around there. I was the oldest one in the family, and I just loved being on the ranch and cowboying and doing my best to live up to some of those vaqueros that were teaching me that I admired so much, and the old family that we came up with. My grandfather and had always been with us, and I loved that lifestyle. And there I was, and just Dad didn't want me to turn into a wild young man around Hebbronville, and we didn't drink or anything at that time. It kept me on the ranch all my life, right? I wasn't around town very much. I'd go in town to visit my grandmother, my maternal grandparents, and I went to school in Hebbronville after the schools. But they kept me at the ranch, and so
Sure.
at 15 years old was I went to they signed me up. Dad had got together enough money to send me to Shriner to finish my high school years at Shriner Military Institute. So.
Okay, so if you don't mind, let's back up a little bit. So
Go ahead.
We've learned how your family wound up in South Texas and what you and your siblings wound up with. Tell me about yourself. Where were you born? What year were you born?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, there I was. I told you my dad and mother got married 1941 as he was being drafted to go into the military. Yeah, and that was all a good story because they were in basic training, and they were in the swamps in Louisiana, and my grandfather was left by himself and just his ranch workers, and Tommy Sr., that would be Mike's grandfather, was on the board, was a stockholder of the bank, and said, "Well, Mr. Hellen, you can get one of those boys back here. You can get a deferral." And so they sent word. They sent word out there and decided that one of them, Dad or Dana, in their tents out there in maneuvers, and one of you boys go back. Well, my dad liked it. It was an adventure for him. He was just a wild young cowboy. Right. Uncle Dana was already in the cattle business, a businessman, a little more serious. And so they decided that my dad would stay in the military during the war, in the Army, and Uncle Dana would come home, and operate his business and help his father.
I see.
On the ranch on there. So that's an important story. The way they did it is the way they got the deferral from it is Tom East Sr., Mike's grandfather, called his brother-in-law, which was Richard Clayburg. Dick Clayburgh Sr., and who was hunting in Colorado. He got hold of him in the phone and told him about the situation. And Mr. Clayburgh called the general or whoever, called somebody in Washington, and they sent word back to the commanding officer on this deal that one of those boys can go home, to help their father. Because people don't understand, but during World War II, farmers and ranchers were obligated to produce.
Right.
They had their war duties. They and the government would help them.
But there were no employees. All the young men.
But there wasn't that many, and all he had a bunch of old men and young boys. And you might have seen in Facebook, I put a picture. If you go back, you'll see a picture of my grandfather standing on one side, and then had all the old time bunch of old men and young boys. And he sent that picture to my dad in Europe. He was over there. So
yeah.
Anyway, that's about my dad. So my dad and mother married in 41. And then he went on, and he served through the duration, all the way from Belgium, France, and Germany, and all of that. It was in Patton's Army as a motor pool sergeant, a truck driver, and motorized deal for Patton's Army. I mean, they were attached to Patton's headquarters there, so he adored General George Patton. Anyway, and dad was not in combat himself, but he was.
Pretty close.
He wasn't a soldier. Yeah. Oh, it was there. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're being shelled and everything. Anyway, that's the thing. So Dad was in training maneuvers out in California in the desert, California, being trained for North Africa under Patton, and then learned that I was born December 6, 1942 in Laredo. Yeah. And see, he got a pass to come home and see his wife. We got pictures there. Yeah.
So when he shipped off to the service, your mother was pregnant with you.
She was pregnant with me. That's correct.
Golly, that's hard times.
Yeah.
That's
pregnant with me. And so that December 6, 42. And then Dad served through the duration. Then Dad came back, and then in 1947, my brother Chris was born. And then 5 years after that, maybe about 52 or so, my sister was born. So there was three of us. Yeah.
Right.
Three of us. And then, as I said, he didn't want me to be a wild. I probably had all the makings of a wild-ass young man, around Hebbronville with
most of us do,
with my friends,
Right.
We just, I might say, we just lived to work cattle. We just lived to do that. And although we didn't have the working our own cattle like my friends, the Jones and East and them, they had plenty to do their own. What we did is went around to other
Yes,
folks' ranches, and when they were going to work cattle, all us boys went,
Right.
And so absolutely, one of the great the Holbein, Alec Holbein, is a close friend of mine. Alec Holbein, Robert Fulbright, Fulbright and Henderson Fulbright, and them and Roy Henry. Roy Henry was a close friend of mine, and his father was the mayordomo, that would be the administrator of the Jones sisters, who had Alta Vista and had Balderas Ranch at that time.
Okay.
It was Doc Henry, R.L. Doc Henry, big man, and came from Cotulla, Artesia Wells area there. And Roy didn't have a mother, Roy pretty much lived in the corrida there on the Jones, but we went to school together and everything. And then after I spent a year at Schreiner and was smart, became smarter than Einstein, and they could see how smart I became.
Didn't take long, did
Yeah,
it?
no, right away. I was uppity. I knew everything, right? I knew everything by then. I was really, really smart. Military school, right? Yeah,
Right.
fit polished. Knew how to shine my shoes and,
Had it all figured
polish
out.
my brass and stand up straight
Right.
and learn to say yes sir and no sir. Well, which I already knew those things.
Right,
We
of
worked
course.
out pretty good.
Yeah.
But anyway, Roy Henry, but a great, again, working cattle. Hell, Doc Henry ran the Alta Vista, and the Balderas. The only Jones country, and he didn't run the Alta Colorado. I didn't know anything about that ranch. That's in Bruce County, and he didn't run the Borregos, which is on Billy Jones, W. Jones II, owned that outright. He inherited that, but Doc Henry ran the Alta Vista big ranch, and we did things big time, and we had some wonderful adventures there on that ranch, and wonderful vaqueros, the true excellent vaqueros, and.
So tell me, you use a lot of terms. I'm familiar with most, but a lot of people listening won't know. Tell me what a corrida is.
La corrida is a cow crowd, or the group of the cattle working group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the group of vaqueros and the structure and
on the bigger ranches there was almost like a village of all the hands.
That's right.
And that was the corrida.
They had families,
right.
Yeah, the family weren't the corrida. The corrida was the corrida was just the cowboys, and like East Ranch would have 20 cowboys to gather those 100,000 acre. Remember, I heard Mike telling you about it on the Kennedy Ranch that had 100,000 acre pasture, and it was 5 roundups, and they would have 25, maybe more men in the corrida before helicopters.
Right.
Yeah. Our corrida, like Hellen Ranch, we'd have about 3 people, and then my brother and another young man, maybe a friend of his, and then a couple of friends of mine, Bob Fulbright, Alec Colbean, and then my dad. There might be 8 or 10 of us, that we would work cattle.
So the corrida wasn't a place; it was a gathering wherever the hands gathered.
It was the crowd of people, the cow crowd. You would say if you was up there in Pontana, it was the cow crowd. That was a group, the La Corrida. Yeah. So anyway, it was wonderful because they had one bunch at Balderas. They had the corrida. The corrida involves a caporal. Caporal is the straw boss, right?
Right.
The head cowboy, and a segundo. Segundo is the one extra in charge just under him, and then the vaqueros, and then you would have the remudero. A remudero would be just the guy that would catch the horses. They're usually a kid to gather the remuda. The remuda were your saddle horses, right?
Yeah.
Remuda.
Well, that's interesting. We just got the hierarchy of the
That's
cowboys.
exactly. Well, first it was a mayordomo, which would be the administrator, such as Doc Henry.
Yeah.
Under him he had a caporal. He had Julian Dimas. Julian Dimas would be at Alta Vista. What a fine man,
Yeah.
Julian Dimas. Yeah, and then the segundo under him many times would change, but he would leave somebody in charge in case he. When I worked cattle with Roy Henry, we were teenage boys, probably 14, 15, 16-year-old boys, and we were the remuderos. We that was our job. Gather the remuda in the morning, bring the horses in so they could saddle up.
Right.
And I had great stories about getting lost as hell. The horse trap was 4,000 acres or something. I remember that very well. But anyway, yeah, that's a hierarchy.
Yeah. I'm so glad you went through that.
I contend that is the reason that Mexican, and we'll say Mexican-American soldiers in World War II were perfect soldiers. In Vietnam, Korea, all of that, perfect soldiers because they understood there was a hierarchy, right?
Yep.
They weren't fighting anybody, each other. They were fighting the damn enemy.
Right.
To me, that
I never.
I mean, you had the general, the colonel, the lieutenant colonel.
Yeah.
You had the all the way down to the captain and the private.
That makes really good sense.
To me, that's my contentious. I think that my father came back from the war, all the horrible things, and he was so proud and made so many good friends and everything. But he was so proud of the Hebbronville boys and South Texas boys. Didn't speak a damn word of English, but they were valiente, and they made hell of a soldiers.
Yeah.
Wonderful soldiers. And all the way up through Vietnam, Yeah. The South Texas boys made damn good soldiers. And it was ranch people. That's what their origins were. Everybody's origin were ranch people way back there.
Different work ethic.
It was a different style of people that you would find in Robstown, where there was farming and the winter garden areas and Carissa Spring, different areas there. Those were different kind of people than we have in Brooks and Jim Hogg, Starr, Zapata.
Yeah, that's all cowboys.
Webb County, Duval County.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful people. Yeah, because they're all part of that culture of vaquerismo. Yeah. It's a culture. They may not have been, and in vaquerismo, the cook's part of the crew, part of the corrida.
Right.
You got to cook, in it.
You better respect him too.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Man, that is really neat.
Somebody was telling we were just talking about somebody throwing a piece of paper in a damn cook's fire. As I said, something just recently came up, but I said I knew a cook that walked off the job when a cowboy threw the rest of his cigarette in the cooking fire in the chimney. That's my damn fire, and you don't have a right to burn up anything in there. Because I always gave my hunting buddies hell about that. Yeah. That we'd be cooking or something like that. And I enjoyed cooking. I consider myself more cocinero than vaquero, but anyway.
Well, yeah,
wouldn't let them don't be throwing anything in the damn fire,
Yeah, he takes pride in his cooking, and you start throwing something in it, it might affect the flavor of the food.
Well, hell yeah, that's not.
Don't mess up the chop.
Don't ever leave the cook's fire alone, No, but anyway, so that was my history was my deal. And I went up there. I got to tell you, I went up there and I got so smart, and all my friend, I didn't know anything. In Hebbronville, either the girls, they kept me on the ranch. Like I said, I left home at 15 in the fall of 1958. In fall, I left home to go to school, and I would never lived again. I never lived again with my family. Yeah, I was always at the ranch, mostly at the Mota Ranch.
So your family was in Hebbronville in town then?
In Evanito. No, they lived on the ranch, the Evanito Ranch, the home. We call the home ranch.
Okay.
My grandparents' home was there, and my mother and Dad built a home when Dad came back from World War II, 1946.
So you were just on different ranches.
And so that's where I grew up there.
I see.
The deal. And like I said, we spent most of our time on the ranch, most of the time with another member of the corrida can be the ranchero. The ranchero is the everyday man that's always there. He's not specialized in anything, because some of the corrida you go. I commented the other day that I remember that when my daddy, we wanted to work cattle. On Sunday, we'd drive in Hebbronville and drive down Main Street, and you'd see a cowboy there, and he'd have his bedroll and his saddle there. Mm-hmm. ready to go to work. He might be a little hungover, but he's ready to go to work, looking for a job, So
Interesting.
yeah.
So the ranchero was like an employee of.
He was an everyday man. He might milk the cows. He'd work cattle with you.
Mm-hmm.
He might. In our case, the ranchero Aureliano Salinas was my grandfather's ranchero. What a fine man, a hell of a vaquero himself. But he had gotten a little older and a little heavier, still highly skilled. But he'd milk the cows and he'd take the bucket of milk to my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
She'd made her
So the ranchero was kind of married to one ranch. And the vaqueros went from ranch to ranch to ranch.
He might, the vaquero would go work somewhere else or something. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Ranchero was a steady guy. He was a steady employee.
Yeah.
He wasn't employed just for the corrida, just for the gathering,
Right.
Yeah. Big ranches like East Ranch, San Antonio Viejo, and Joan, and stuff. They had their own situation. I'm mostly talking about like our family, the Hennett, Fulbright, the Holbein, the Martinez, the Hellens, Barfield.
Yeah.
All of us would, we'd have from 20,000 acres down to ranch, mostly about maybe 8 or 10,000 acre ranches.
And on a ranch that size, you didn't need
if a man by himself, like my dad, could run maybe 500 cows or 350 cows and burn pear. That's the only way Dad survived. Burning pear.
Yeah.
Well, hell, the bigger ranches they couldn't do much burning pear.
Well, they just couldn't keep.
Mike East told about his dad burning pear for steers in the 1950s. But
so tell me, what did Hebbronville look like? Let's say when you were a teenager, how many people were there?
I don't really know. Maybe 2,500, 3,000, and I don't know what it is now. You talk. It's at the time the county. I don't think it's changed much. The county. It's just that people moved in and out of the towns.
Right.
Is what it is. I think Hogg County probably has 8,000 people or something like that. Maybe 7,000, 6,500, maybe something like that.
Right.
And I have a lot less of them live on ranches anymore. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you were 5 or 6 years old when your dad came home from the service.
That's correct. Yeah. 42 and 46. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Now, that's one thing that you see. I love to keep these saddles because I see the spirit of that person. When I have their saddle, I see their spirit and the memories of that person.
Sure.
The saddle seems to make a difference to me. That may sound a little weird, but
not
I see
at all.
I see their spirit.
Yeah.
So that's my dad's saddle. It's a Shirley Brown saddle. He was absolutely infatuated with tie-down calf roping. Tom East Jr., he admired Tom East Jr. as a close friend and had worked cattle with him. Again, the same situation in my dad's era. The young men would go work cattle around on other ranches. Mm-hmm. Dad was invited to work with Tom East Jr. And at the time it was a King Ranch. He was a caporal of the King Ranch corrida there. Mike told you all that story. I know it. He told you so much, it's hard to remember all those stories.
Oh, yeah, it's a lot.
But, he's a wonderful history that Mike told you. But the San Antonio Viejo Ranch, probably 165, 70,000 acres, right there in Hogg County, mostly. Anyway.
Really, pretty much right across the highway from you.
It's on down the road. That's correct.
Yeah.
That's right. It's right on down the road. But anyway, they in my dad's era, he was a caporal for my grandfather. I picked good pictures of his corrida, and all his corrida were the Badillos, the Badillo family, the Rafael Garza family. Everyone knows about Quineños, they're just the king's people, the Quineños. Mm-hmm. But almost every ranch has some people that are so loyal to them and have been with them for generations. Almost every ranch that's been at it a while had the same thing. In our case, something very interesting, I think, that my grandfather did in that period before he busted out, he learned the country was overrun with wild horses at the time, feral horses. Mm-hmm. There was as big a problem or bigger than wild hogs like we have now. You know, people got visions of wild horses that stood there like my brother did. Most of them weren't. They're mostly inbred, pot-bellied, plugs.
So that's where the old term Llanos Misteños came from.
The Llanos Misteños, the Mustang Plains. That's right, the Mustang Plains, exactly. But anyway, they were eating up with it. My grandfather, in his diary, so his happiest times, he said, went with Henry to run the horses out of the pasture. So they ran these horses out of where were eating up the grass. Mm-hmm. People just don't understand how destructive a grazer horses are.
Oh, wow.
They just don't understand that.
Eat a lot more.
They think they're wonderful, but out west, they're ruined the damn land. Mm-hmm. I've been on the Navajo. Elva and I went out there on the Navajo, and had some of the young Navajo men had gone to work with NRCS, and they talked Grandpa into fencing off their little family plots and everything, and they had grass knee deep in the damn thing, and the rest of them is blow sand. Because they got roaming bands of damn horses on there. They're terrible.
I knew they were there, but I never knew they were that big of a problem at that time.
A horse has two sets of choppers, and he can nip that grass off, the most desirable grass, the little blue stem. He finds the little blue stem, and he'll nip that son of a gun on right down to the dirt.
Yeah, just like a sheep.
And that root dies.
Yeah. Just like a sheep, they eat it all the way down.
Exactly, yeah.
Wow.
Whereas a cow is built different, She's got a raspy tongue, a long raspy tongue.
She's got to wrap her tongue around it.
Raspy tongue and got sharp lower incisors and can pull that damn thing, she lays that piece of grass right over those bottom teeth, and then she raises her head, is all she's got to do.
Yep.
And it goes into that rumen, She goes into that rumen.
So what are you talking about when the horses were such a problem? 40s, 50s, somewhere along in there? Or
what is that?
When were the horses such a problem?
Oh, yeah, down in South Texas?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, this was this was in the first year when my grandfather was first there, 1895, 96.
Okay.
And he and Henry would go and run the horses out of Henry's pasture.
Okay, so this was turn of the century. Okay.
Mm-hmm. My grandfather told my Uncle Dana a really good story about horses, is that as long as there was wild horses in South Texas, that generally the lagunas would hold water. Mm-hmm. The lagunas would hold water as long as there was horses. When the horses were all roped out and everything, and the lagunas would leak, because the horses go into the water to drink. Mm-hmm. They go into the water and they tamp the bottom of it in those lagunas on there. Whereas, and interestingly enough, if you go down along the border, up and down the border, you would see bands of wild horses, and the ranchers wanted them there because during the drought, they could beat out a path to a dirt tank, a boggy tank, mm-hmm. and the cattle could follow them and drink.
Oh. Huh.
And so they had horses. My father-in-law, Elva's daddy, had a ranch down in Zapata County. We ranched there shortly after Elva and I were married.
Okay.
And there was wild horses, and he got rid of them, Mm-hmm. But we didn't particularly have trouble. But that was the reason for the wild horses.
Yeah. Well,
Excuse me.
You mentioned lagunas, just so people.
Anyway, that's my point. Is that my grandfather said that the lagunas held water until they roped out all the wild horses, and after that, so.
And after that, they started leaking more.
Yeah, and then the droughts became there wasn't no surface water.
Right. Yeah, I've never
A
heard
few
that theory
arroyos,
before.
different
That's
areas
interesting.
and everything.
But for people that don't know, a laguna is a natural clay
Drainage, that's right.
Yeah, and it's generally kind of round,
That's right.
and they hold water real well.
That's right.
Unless you puncture that clay, and
That's exactly right. Yeah.
But they naturally hold water.
Silt has been washed in there. That's right.
Yeah.
Small particles.
Yeah, so back in that time, these were all grassy plains,
Uh-huh.
and there was a little bit of brush in the draws and whatnot. But the lagunas would always have trees and whatnot
That's
because
right.
there was water there year round.
That's correct.
And-
My grandfather, when he leased those 8 sections, that 5,200 acre of land, he didn't have a well, but he started running his cattle and just loose herding them.
Mhm.
Yeah. At that time, he didn't live on the sordo. Uncle Will had turned the sordo back to the lender.
Okay.
Under Will, it turned it back to the lender, and and he'd moved his everything to the Chancaca Ranch, which is next door. Again, the Gutierrez family, close friends of ours, and that's where my grandfather lived until he went bust and went back to Washington D.C.
So he may get mad at me for saying his name, but I guess that's the Lauro Gutierrez is a friend of mine.
Uh-huh.
Is that his family that you're talking about?
The Gutierrez family, yeah. The Chancaca Ranch, don't see, yeah.
They were big into cutting horses and stuff like
Well,
that.
there's of course, there may be that different branches of the Gutierrez family. You got to understand one thing: Cortez only had about 250. What do they call them? Anyway, his soldier Cortez brought them from Spain and brought their names, right?
Right.
And started and gave those names to the mestizos, because they married. Okay, and so you only have that many Spanish names. So there may be a lot of Gutierrez's.
Yeah, but Lauro is right there.
I got off my subject though, because I wanted to tell you that everybody knows Queneños were attached to the King Ranch and the story of Captain King's bringing them from Cruillas, and wonderful story, and loyal people that stayed with them, all these Quintanillas, different ones. But anyway, in our family, the Badillos, this is a Rafael Garza family. And on the Sordo Ranch is where my grandfather first got to know the Garza family. They were working there for Will Wall, and they were the Garza family. And and then after Uncle Will shut it down, they moved to Rondado, and the Garza family had a meat market there in Rondado. There were lots of stories about them. Because they were interesting people. They had a good sense of humor and pretty good cowboys. They weren't the highly skilled vaqueros, but they were good enough,
Right.
They were good enough.
Yeah.
And and different ones were more skilled than others.
Yeah.
Went to work for other big ranches. But anyway, the Badillos. And I tell the story in our book where Badillo is a surname. Badillo is just his surname, like
last name,
like Gonzalez, Garza, anything else. But there was, in the old days at the Sordo Ranch, there was a drummer that would come around, literally a drummer. He was a peddler, would come around to the ranches, calling on different ranches and selling needle and thread, and things that ranch people needed, cloth, rice, maybe fideo, different things, non-perishable stuff, and he would announce, you don't ever want to sneak up on a person on a ranch. Let them know you're coming. Always clear your throat or whistle or something, right?
Right.
Well, it's just not the thing to do. Mm-hmm. Anyway, but the Badillo was the name of this peddler, and he had a little drum. And when you could hear him thump, 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 they knew that was Badillo coming,
Yeah.
and get their money ready. Grandma, get your money out, get your purse out. We're gonna need to buy something, some ribbon or something, But anyway, so Rafael Badillo, the old patriarch of the Badillo family, that Rafael Badillo was a little boy at that time, and he made himself a little drum and would follow that guy around, and after the guy left, and he would do that, just acting. And so he got that sobre de nombre. He got that nickname.
That was his nickname.
Yeah, he's Badillo, and we called him Old Badillo. Yeah, older fellow was Old Badillo, and that he was my grandfather's caporal, because one of the interesting things that enterprises that my grandfather got into before he was able to buy a few steers around to grow was that they would catch wild horses, wild mares, and the ranchers around there would have a blooded jack that have a breeding donkey, not a little burro, but I mean a big old donkey the size of a big mule, but he's a donkey. And they would breed those. My grandfather would have the vaqueros, or himself, once he drilled him a well, he'd trap these wild mares in there, feral horses, and it would breed them to that blooded jack that he would borrow from a neighbor. It's a common practice in South Texas. Somebody got a good stud. Bring your stud over, my mare's, and let's see what we get. Anyway, he would borrow that blooded jack or take his mares to that blooded jack.
Yes, sir.
I think it was Don Ascension Martinez's, but I'm not sure of that. But they all had that because an important commodity was mules, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody had to have mules, especially in the farming area. Mm-hmm. So my grandfather's first enterprise was getting those wild mares bred to a blooded jack and raising the yearling mules. The mares, he would keep them around where he could loose herd them by bending a metal rod to their front fetlock right here, to those mares loosely.
Yeah.
And if they'd run, they'd step on that thing. And in English, I learned later, I researched it, and they call it tog, T-O-G.
T-O-G.
If you togged a horse, it wasn't hobbled it, you togged it. And that means you put something around one leg and they'd step on it.
Yeah, hobble ties two together.
Yeah.
But the tog is just on
a tog. Leg. Yeah, I read about it later, so I don't know what they called them in Spanish. But anyway, it was a rod, and we have several in our little museum, our collection.
Do you really?
Yeah, we have several, and where they would drag them, that end of that soft metal iron would be sharp as a.
Yeah, getting filed every day.
Yeah, when she'd drag that and grazing, Anyway, so he would raise yearling mules, and he and this other young boy, who turned out to be Rafael Badillo, he probably
the drummer,
probably 12, 14 years old, young cowboy, and they would herd those things up to like Sinton and Odom and that area there, and sell those mules
to the farmers.
They'd sell their yearly bunch of mules to those farmers that were breaking up those good lands.
Yeah,
all that good soil,
Yeah,
yeah. Maybe as far as Victoria,
Yeah,
who knows?
Sure,
but we know that we did that. The family history.
That's really neat.
Family history that he would do that. And my grandfather said he wouldn't just deliver them, he'd wait. When he delivered them, he always, all this story was told to my Uncle Dana, who told us about it.
Yes.
This wasn't written down. But my grandfather said when he and his cowboy, who happened to be Badillo, at least one of them, delivered those mules, I picture 10 or 12 head, I don't know, they had herded them all the way where the market was, where they were going to sell them. And when he delivered them, the people that worked the farms were black people, Negro,
Yeah.
African Americans, and he said the damnedest fight you ever saw in your life is those big strapping young men would grab that damn yearling mule, yearling or coming to year-old mule, grab that damn thing and collar him, harness him. He said it was the most interesting thing, ball of dust and kicking and screaming and raising hell and hair flying, and plow that damn thing into the ground and said, "All right, now run, you SOB."
Yeah.
But my grandfather told Uncle Dana that he'd love to. He said, "I stay there for the entertainment."
Well, those weren't cowboys.
Huh?
They
were farm workers.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were sharecroppers mostly.
Yeah.
Mostly sharecroppers because the big Mathis Mathis cattle. Remember that there's a wonderful history there of those.
Yeah.
That huge ranch all the way from Mathis back to
Ranch.
Port Aransas and stuff. I can't think of it right now, but yeah, those were sharecroppers, black families, sharecroppers, and he would sell them. That was a good story.
It's a great
but
story.
That's how he met. That's how he hooked up with Rafael Badillo. And so all my life, all our corrida, everybody, I have great pictures of my dad as a caporal, 1941. My mother, when my mother was married, when they got married, someone gave my mother a little brownie box camera for the deal. And it's the most valuable thing, because she took a lot of pictures. My grandfather on horseback and my dad and working cattle and with the corrida lined out and all their remuda, all the horses and how they worked cattle at that time.
Yeah.
At that time, Uncle Dana had the Toro Ranch, which was right at Rondado, and then the Mota Ranch, and then the Armstrong Soda Ranch, and then the Hellen Ebanito Ranch, and then the Hellen Schooland pasture on that. So all those when they'd work cattle, they'd start. They had the whole removal and everything. They'd start at one end, usually down at Uncle Dana's, working the calves. It's summertime. You worked in the hottest part of the summertime because of screw worms. You didn't have, there were less less flies. Yeah.
You could brand and
hottest part of the summer, the canicula, the dog days of summer.
Yep.
July and August. And they'd start working down there and had the remuda, and then they'd move the remuda to the Mota and work those cattle, C.W. Hellen's cattle, and my dad was the caporal. He was the head cowboy.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have some good pictures of that.
Did you have multiple generations of the Badilla family?
That's the point I was going to make. Is that yes, we even just recently. If you ever talk to Brian, when you next time you talk to Brian Volz, ask him about Minnie Favela. Minnie Favela was a Badillo. She was their housekeeper and cook there on the Balderas for Will and Brian Vogt.
Yeah.
For their highfalutin quail hunters and all of that.
Yeah.
And she was a Badillo. Yeah.
Okay.
Her grandfather, that was her grandfather, was Rafael Badillo.
Well, I tell you, all that's really rare. My family has ranched up around Ensenal since 1942 is when my grandfather started buying land there. And today, back then, he had a cowboy that helped him from there in Ensenal named Julian Alba. And Julian's grandson still runs our ranch in Ensenal.
Isn't that wonderful? Yeah.
And his son, Charlie, has worked some on the ranch. And this summer, his grandson is helping at the ranch. So right now, we have 5 generations of the same family that have been on our ranch going back a lot.
So
of
see,
years.
that's the same principle.
That kind of continuity in today's world is
That's
just
right.
unheard
That's
of.
exactly right.
But we're real proud of that. I mean, I'm proud of the fact that we've, we're family, we're partners, we're friends.
Absolutely, we're the same way. We're exactly the same way.
The world might be a better place if we had more of that going on.
That's right, and
loyalty
and good people. You know, good people. Vaqueros, vaquero people. That culture. That's that culture. You know, not everyone could be a great bronc rider or roper or anything, but he was still a vaquero. You know, it was of that culture.
Sure.
And that's the thing there.
It's a job for everyone.
I wanted to, we've gotten off the subject of some because I want to brag a little bit about me. No, but anyway, we did all this, us as boys, we worked cattle all around with different places. We got so much experience with the different cattlemen, the wonderful Holbein family and Jack Fulbright and Mr. Hennett and all those old timers. Everyone had something different, cooked different things in their camp, and or it ran different kind of cattle and stuff like that. But it was we were really could be cowboys,
Yeah.
Anyway, so in the fall of 1958, I was 15 years old, and that's when they signed me up to go to school at Shriner Institute in Kerrville.
Yes, sir.
And a military school. Not that I needed it. There were kids there that were obviously outlaws or had problems or there weren't drugs in those days. There was a little drinking and stuff, some of them, but they'd send them to school. A judge would say, you can do that or you're going to go to reform school or something. There was a few of those, but most of them were good kids. Mm-hmm. Most of them were pretty good kids, just teenagers, which can get in a hell of a lot of trouble on their own.
Pretty quick.
And I didn't know anything about girls. I'll tell you, I did. All the girls, I was either related to them or they were ugly, or something. I just didn't know anything about it. 15 years old.
A little naive, that's all.
Yeah, imagine. Well, I mean, 15 years old now are pretty darn mature, with all this, everything. But that
in some ways.
Yeah, in some way. I mean, anyway, bottom line is, so then all the other boys, my friends, and all that, and roommates and everything, he'd talk about girls all the time. So I said, well, I don't know anything, but they have a military ball every year. They'd have a military ball, and you're supposed to, you could bring a date. You bring your date with the thing, and they'd bring their date. Some people brought their sisters, mm-hmm. And they got to dress up, and you put on your dress military uniform, with all your brass polish and everything, and had an orchestra and everything. It's like the prom. But anyway, so I said, I'm going to show these SOBs. I'm gonna invite. I don't know if she'll come or not, but I'm going to invite the prettiest girl in Hebbronville High School. And I hadn't been in school with her because she came just when I was being sent off in there. A blue-eyed blonde cheerleader, basketball star, just the nicest person you ever saw in your life. All the boys were after her there in Hebbronville and surrounding towns and everything. I'm going to invite her. Well, damn, she didn't come. And I got a good picture of her, and she's right in there. Yeah.
Still hanging around.
Yeah, still hanging around. We've been married. By 19, we were married and had a baby on the way.
So y'all started dating when you were 15 years old? Yeah,
not much dating. Just you ride around a little bit in the car, But,
yeah.
But so she agreed to come to the military ball, so I could show her off to my all my friends,
Well,
from
yeah.
Dallas and Houston. Anyway,
She probably didn't
I
like
was-
you when you were in Hebbronville, but when she saw your brass, she was probably all in,
yeah, probably not. That's probably what it is. Military guy. No, what a woman. What a woman she is.
You're
Her
blessed.
father, they came from Catula, Texas. Her father was in the caterpillar business. He was also the greater generation. He was in the Pacific in World War II in the CB.
What is her maiden name?
Wedgeworth.
Wedgeworth. Okay.
Wedgeworth, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Wedgeworth. And A.P. Wedgeworth, like a second father to me. Because, like I said, we were married at 19. He gave me my first job. That's how I did. Our ranch wasn't. Well, in the first place, in the 1950s, you couldn't ranch any damn cattle. It was a horrible drought.
Tough way to make
Terrible drought.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad went to work for Mr. Harry H. Thompson on the yards in San Antonio. Harry H. Thompson was old man Harry, not little Harry.
Yeah.
Not Harry F. Thompson. That's from Catula. This is Harry H. Thompson, was Mr. Harry, and he spoke with a lisp. And he bought cattle. He bought Jones cattle. He bought big operators cattle, all in Victoria, all that country, and shipped them to Kansas and stuff like that. But so my dad went to work for him, receiving the cattle on the ranches.
Right.
We had the best damn stories you ever saw. I can tell you, these stories aren't about me, but my dad was right there on some of those stories. We're talking about Mr. Jones, Mr. Dick Jones on the Alta Vista Ranch, and they were there. The caporal had told the cook that Mr. Jones has a guest coming. Has a guest coming today. He prepara los panes muy bien. Preparalos bien. Make really good bread.
Got a guest.
Because that's what he wanted. He wanted good, really bad bread. So the cook did his best. I don't know if he's the same cook as probably not when I was there. He was probably the cook's helper when Roy and I were there. But anyway, bottom line is, so there's Mr. Dick Jones, Dick A.C. Jones, big man. and Mr. Harry H. Thompson in the camp house, and Dad off to the side listening, and the damn cook. They were negotiating for multi-tens of thousands of dollars for these Jones steers that year. And the damn cook kept getting right in between them to Mr. Jones with his bread. ¿Qué tal de panes? Mr. Dick, ¿qué tal de panes? ¿Qué tal? And he talking, he said, ¿qué tal de panes, Mr. Dick? ¿Qué tal de panes? And Dad said, he felt so bad about that guy. Dick Jones finally stood up and said, get your GD bedroll and put it in my car. You're fired. Anyway, that was a good story. Another great story, even better, that Dad told, that laughed about, he and Uncle Dennis when they were drinking their beers, was the Partición Ranch is down there where, do you know where Kelsey Bass is? Kelsey Bass Tank? Okay. Well, the Partición Ranch is San Rafael del Partición, is a very old, very large ranch. I think probably 60 or 70,000 acres, and Captain Bill McMurray, I don't know if you ever heard of Captain Bill. Mm-hmm. Captain Bill McMurray had leased that ranch, and they ran big steers on them. They grew big steers, is what it was. And Mr. Harry had bought those steers, and Dad was supposed to be there to receive. They were going to sort them, and they had to tip the horns in order to ship them on the truck. Because when they grew, they had big old horns. They had to tip those horns keep from inch the other car, and the Particiones Corrales pens were corral de leña. Corral de leña is that stacked wood.
Solid mesquite wood.
Stacked wood, solid, and they were shoulder high on a man on horseback. And this was in August. And Dad said it probably is the most miserable he's ever seen anything. Dad was all right. He was up on the cut and shoot. But everybody down on the ground, I mean, there was a column, there was no wind. There was a column of dust probably went up 20 feet, 20 yards up in the air, and pen full of bawling steers, hooking like hell, everybody, cowboys moving them into the crowd pen. And in the cow pen was Captain Bill Barfield's head man, who he always has. His name was Jake Sharon. The Sharon boys, Sheeran. Sharon boys were well-known cowboys, spoke very little English, very, very rough English, worked on all the big ranches. There was Jake, Elmo, Bill, Sharon.
They didn't speak English?
Very little, very little. They were Mexican-American.
Okay.
Their whole life was on the ranches, working on the ranch. They worked on Jones, East, all of them. Mike knew them. Mike knew Elmo, in later years. But they spoke very rough, hard, rude English.
Yeah, I just asked with a name like Sharon.
You would think that Anglo name, but that's not so true in South Texas, No, not so true. Not always true. Nowadays, everybody speaks English,
Yeah, of course.
But I'm talking about back then. And there. But anyway, so there was Captain Bill. Dad was cutting because they were sorting off. He was just sorting where Captain Bill said we're going to ship there, and they're telling Dad. and Captain Bill was on the walkway there with the clippers, And they had hundreds of these steers. The steers wanted to get the hell out of that damn pen, too. They were it was miserable.
Yeah.
Swirling dust.
Hot and dusty.
And Jake was in the crowd pen, horseback, putting them through there. Well, Captain Bill, I can just picture Captain Bill it had that spray of blood would hit you, right? If you tip that horn, that spray of blood would hit you. And then the grit and the dust on there, caked on there. I could visualize it.
Yeah.
Captain Bill, long sleeve shirt, real tiered leggings. Anyway, and he would keep telling Jake, slow down, because the cattle, he couldn't slow. The cattle wanted out of there too. And those steers knew the way out of there. It was down that chute. They were going to go. And they would just pile in one after the other. Well, Captain Bill couldn't get to the horns, right, to tip them. So you have to back them back out. We've done that a lot of times. Something will get down in there. Well, what a pain, Don't put so damn many in that they're crammed in there, Well, the cattle, Jake couldn't help it. And finally, Captain Bill blew his stop. Said, "Gee, God damn it, Jake. One of us has got to go, and he was eye to eye because he was a hard-looking man, Captain Bill. And you imagine that blood and the grit in his face and looking at Jake. Eye to eye, Jake was horseback right there. And Jake kind of lowered his head. He called him Cap. Okay, Cap, I'll go. Okay, Cap, I'll go. Dad heard him. And Captain Bill waited a minute. He said, "No, Jake, you stay, and I'm going." And Dad said he got down off the chute, off the rampway, unbuckled his leggings, folded them up on his arm, slowly walked to his Buick, which was parked out there, got in his car, and left in a cloud of dust on the Caliche Road. God, their Dad loved to tell that story. And I'm glad I could tell you that story because everybody needs to know that story.
No doubt.
And every cattleman that has spent time in a pen, a corral de leña with no air circulation through it, in August, and knows about tipping horns and you got that little spray of hot blood, it just doesn't get any more miserable than that. Nowadays we got squeeze chutes, we got the electric clippers, we got all of that.
Yep.
But you can imagine what it would do to your wrists, how many times it would take when those there. You clamp that.
Yeah. We still have, at Ensenada, we still have one set of pins. That's at Corral de Leña.
Corral de Leña.
And I always hated them because you didn't have anything to climb. And you get a hot one after you start looking for something to climb. It's
right.
really hard to climb those fences that are built that way. You know, they're pretty solid.
Excuse me.
And you had to know your way around the pins to know where
hell
the foot
yeah.
was.
You better know your way around the cow.
But they were miserable. There's no doubt about that. And, you know, it's a shame. Most of those are disappearing these days. There's not many of them still standing anymore for those reasons.
That's right.
But at the time
there were a lot of labor. There were a lot of labor to do that. The ranch next door to us, my grandfather wrote of Don Hipólito Garcia Rondado Ranch, fencing in 1,000 acres of Corral de Leña. Yeah. Wow. I mean, huge.
Not just
huge.
the pins, the whole
perimeter. Just the whole thing.
Wow, that's amazing.
I've got it in the book there, and the pins there at the Jesus Maria, which is right next door. These are all across the road from this place. You're saying that's Mr. Donaldson's buying. Yeah, the Jesus Maria is where the big old house, the old castle-looking house. There, you can't hardly see it now. It's so grown up in brush. But anyway, I had a wonderful time at Shriner, and Elva and I dated a little bit, but mostly after we went to A&I at Kingsville, and I was ready to go to work. I got out. There wasn't enough room for me on the ranch. It was always on weekends we'd go and help Dad, or any time he's working cattle, we would take off from whatever work we did.
Right.
My first employment was with a livestock feed company, and I did really well, except that I didn't realize I was too smart, and I got fired. Yeah, it was Mormon Manufacturing Company, Mormon Minerals, and I did really well with them, and I got real smart on that and got fired. John Powell fired me. He was a sales manager. I didn't realize how the system works at that time. I guess. Yeah.
You didn't have the hierarchy figured out at the company.
I was smart. I won a brand new Mustang. They flew Elvin. They flew Elvin and I up to Illinois, and they gave away a brand new seven new Mustangs in 1965. So anyway, that I got too smart for my britches there.
It happens.
Anyway, so then I didn't have a job, but I went, and that's when I worked in oil field just for a little while, you know. And then I found out. Then I had an uncle in Kingsville that got me a job with Buddy Childs, a Ford place there, who was a friend of ours already in college from A&I. So I went to work for Buddy. I really liked it, and I liked the Ford business, the car business, and my brother Chris was the designated rancher for our small rancher, you know.
Right.
You know, and my dad was a very active man, vital active man. He wasn't any reason. Nobody was ready to retire or anything. And
but everybody couldn't make a living off the same ranch.
We could all make a living on the ranch, you know, and yeah, and so I worked for an oil field for a little while, driving a truck, and then and had some good experiences there. You know, I learned a lot, and then it did my stint with Buddy Childs, and I learned a lot there, and was successful there, and then Mr. Dickey, L.A. Dickey, father of my roommate at college at A&I at Shriner, Larry Dickey.
Okay.
And an old family friend was struggling with his Ford dealership. He was an old man, and I had a young whippersnapper and had a lot of friends, and we turned his place around, and he sold me a working interest in it, and with no money, Well, eventually I paid, but anyway, he financed the 20% ownership, and then once he passed away, then Larry and I ended up with a deal in the car business, and we're very successful all during the oil boom days and all of that.
And the
in
dealership,
70s.
the dealership was in Alice, or
No, sir, Falfurrious.
oh, it was in Fowl. Okay.
Falfurrious, yeah.
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 Okay.
So Elvin and I lived in Falfurrious, raised our kids there.
Okay.
Yeah, both our kids there. And then things got a little western there in Falfurrious. Elva was a school teacher, and they lost control. The local government, local police, and the judges and everything, they just lost control of the crime and stuff there in Falfurrious, and 281 got the reputation of the marijuana highway. The smuggling came up that 281, and we had local kids got involved so bad with it, and we formed a little support group for the police, and the authorities. A little support group, a citizens group, had meetings, and well, I was the damn spokesman and all the leader, and anyway, it turned pretty bad, pretty vicious, and hell, they firebombed my house. I was able to salvage it with wash the gasoline off of it, and then 2 cars at the dealership, and a pump next door at the deal, and I was very active with the Ford groups at that time, management control groups where you meet with other dealers around, and we met with a brother of a friend of ours there one time in San Antonio. We were in the elevator going back to our room after a meeting, and Robin Gardner, and he was a very, very good dealer. He was a Chevy dealer out in Plainview, Texas, and this was all through Texas Auto Dealer Association, which I was involved in, and all of that, and he said, "Well, y'all wouldn't want to move, will you?" And I said, "Oh, no." And Elva said, "Yes." Yes, because
Elva wins.
we were having hell.
She sounds like it.
All that crap, going on there. And so anyway, we found out that his brother, Robin Gardner's brother, Bill Gardner, and his partner named John R. Sheely, had the Ford place that they had bought from John R.'s father in Hondo Ford. So we came and we made a deal, and so we moved to Hondo up here.
1982?
In 1981, and then actually we moved into this house in March of '83. By the time we got it built,
Okay.
and so we did that till the early '90s. 10 years, a little over 10 years. And then it was time to get out. By then, my like I said, my poor brother had MS. MS was just suffering from that. My poor dad had already started to deteriorate mentally, just with a family tragedy, terrible tragedy. That's called the long goodbye,
Yes.
And so mother was having trouble there, and so I quit the car business then, and retired, and went down to the ranch. Elva was here, but I would be down there 3 or 4 days a week, every week.
I see.
On there, and started working with Dad to see what we can do, to keep our ranch, the old ranch, together. Nobody wanted to split it up and
Right.
be temporary millionaires, like you do when you sell family ranches. We didn't want to sell ours, So
That's interesting. So you moved away, got in the car business because your brother was kind of the cowman, and your dad was still there, and then
yeah,
they lose their health, and you've got to go home and
that's right.
take up the slack.
I got to go. Yeah,
Yeah.
I got to go home and loved it. You know,
Oh, I'm sure you did.
I
Yeah.
loved it. Still do.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, we discovered when I told Dad. When I first started talking to Dad about it, I said, the only example I could think of ranches at the time, I didn't know anything about it. I said, King Ranch had a lot of country and a lot of family members, and they formed a corporation and gave oh hell, good gosh,
Yeah.
way out of my range. I said, well, I'm just using that as an example, Dad. Well, I don't know. Well, anyway, he ended up talking to his attorney and our accountant in Laredo, and they came up and they formed an LLC, limited liability company, and had it all formed and everything like that. But Dad was still nervous about it. He didn't like it. It just sounded like a company, because he knew it was a small operation. He had a nice little herd. He had become an officer and an originator of the Texas Longhorn Breeder Association, and he had a nice little herd of 50 or 60 cows that he enjoyed messing with and going to meetings. And he had money from minerals at that time,
Right.
and he didn't need that. And he had a little crossbred herd down at the Mota. I don't know, maybe up 200 cows. I'm not sure what where we work cattle, but anyway, it wasn't necessary for him to ranch,
Right.
And one of the funny things I remember, he burned pear all his life to keep his maximum number of cows on the place, but during these recurring droughts, which are ongoing,
Part of
burned pear, and then one time a friend of mine, a guy that worked for an oil company there on the school land pasture, which Uncle Dana ran, but our minerals were kept together in one deal, and they started making wells over there, some good little gas and oil wells over there, and they saw my dad at Roldan's Texaco, and Mr. Hellen, they made a good well out there at the school land. And Dad's comment was, "Oh, good! I can feed my cows hay now. You didn't have to burn pear." But anyway, that's how he ranched. And Chris would work with my dad, but also work for the other ranchers. Chris was a very skilled cattle manager and worked for several other. He had a lot of good friends that were in the cattle business.
Yeah.
The Stone brothers and different ones, and Chris managed ranches for them.
Okay.
And so, but he was deteriorating all the time. That was a slow thing.
So it's so cruel.
But anyway, that's what I did. Anyway, so my point was that when I finally told Dad that we did come up with a family limited partnership, and we didn't have to, if we keep it going for a long enough time, then this major firm in San Antonio that worked this out for us, we didn't have to pay any inheritance taxes. And Dad wouldn't have to pay any, wouldn't have to sell any land or anything.
Yeah.
And it was a family limited partnership. So we formed C.W. Hellen Ranches Family Limited Partnership. And we kept our minerals separate. Hellen mineral properties are separate. We don't have a lot of mineral income, but we own all the rights to it.
My dad always said that cows grow fatter in the shade of a tank battery.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that the truth? Yeah. Nice. The best mineral there was for cows.
It helps everything.
Best mineral there was for cows. Darn right.
That's a fact.
So anyway, so Dad was okay with that, and he actually signed. He was able to sign off. We were able to help him sign off on the organization of Family Limited Partnership. My mother and I were the general partners, and all the rest of our family were limited partners. Mm-hmm. How it worked, and then my mother and both Chris and my mother passed away in 2009, and then Charlotte became my co-managing general partner, and she's done just fine with it. She takes care of the office and the pay of the bills and other things, dealing with different ones on there. She lives in Bastrop. She and her husband live in Bastrop.
And that is great history.
But we visit the ranch periodically, you know. She and her husband lease the big house. We call it the big house, my mother and dad's big home there. And I lease 1,600 acres myself. And Charlie leases some. And my Chris's wife, Chris's sister, I'm sorry, Chris's sister and her husband lease the most. All of Chris's family lease all of the Mota Ranch.
I see.
Mota.
Okay.
And Charlotte's family and myself lease the Ivanito Ranch. So.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
It's a good deal, and we're very proud of the ranch. We want to keep it together.
Yeah.
Anyway, when Charlotte and I went to the Frostbank Tower there in San Antonio to close the deal with Mr. Curfey, who put this whole deal together for us, he said, "How long you want to make this thing for?" And we said, "As long as we can." He said, "Well, I can make it for 50 years." This was this was 2000. 2000, and I said, "Yeah, for 50 years." So in 2050, this thing will dissolve. So we're halfway through.
Yeah.
The deal, but it's working fine for us.
Good for you. It doesn't always work.
That's working.
When it does, it's good.
That's working fine for us. Yeah.
Good.
Now I'm turning things over more and more to my son and my daughter.
Yep.
So
the way it goes.
So that's part of it. I probably got up more stories there. I got a good story that we about the Badillos, there were just a lot of stories about them. They had an uncle. Badillo had a brother. It was Tio Nino, Saturnino Garza, Jr. And Tio Nino was an old bandit, just like old Rafael was too. These were people that you didn't trifle with, you know. Mm-hmm. They were very proud. They were very proud, the Badillos were, so, but very loyal to us, you know. Yeah. And they protected my grandfather when he was by himself at the Mota Ranch, you know, because he was, one of the reasons he got that Mota country is because the old stage road and the main road went right through that country. Mm-hmm. And so it would be like on a main highway. Right. So you'd get all kind of riffraff had the rights to come and go on your ranch. And that's one reason he was able to lease that 7 cents an acre and then eventually buy it for about $1.50 an acre or something. Yeah. That's the reason for the Mota Ranch. It was the old salt road and the stage road across there.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
But anyway, I wanted to tell you about Nino. Tio Nino, a lot of the old vaqueros, when they got real old, they loved the corrida. And so some of them would go to cooking, and it would go to be the cocinero, you know. Mm-hmm. And some of them were cleaner than others, and more careful than others. Nino wasn't. Nino had he had worked for my grandfather back in the early years, after World War I and on, when my grandfather was representing George W. Saunders and Company in Fort Worth as a cattle broker, and the local cattlemen had the confidence of my grandfather, and he would represent George Saunders and Company, and they would ship the cattle to them by train out of Hebbronville. Hebbronville was a major shipping center by train, and they would ship the cattle to Fort Worth. And so my grandfather, although a banker also, but also a broker for this George W. Saunders and Company, right. Who shipped Chicago and all over. But so he would get one thing that my grandfather would do. He would send Nino with the load of cattle on the train on there. See, because the railroad were careless. The cattle, a lot of times the cattle had just been dipped. They were hot, you know. You had to keep those cattle up, and you couldn't let them get down at all.
Right.
Even if you packed them kind of loose in the cars, which they generally didn't.
No.
You know. And so Nino was responsible for, well, he was the original cowpoke, right?
Yeah.
he rode on the cars and made sure and kept the cattle up. And if the railroad would turn them off on a side track or something, you know, and forget about them, he'd raise hell with them because he could speak a little bit of English. He had been a revolutionary in the Battle of Nuevo Laredo. And when they would work cattle, my dad, as a boy, he said Tio Nino would take his leggings off and his pocket knife, he would pick pieces of metal out of his knee from shrapnel on there. So Nino had a history, and he didn't take any poop for anybody.
Right.
Right. He was pretty direct with people. So, but he's a big man. Anyway, that was Nino's job, and he told we just had so many good stories about Tio Nino. In the corrida, somebody would bring up Nino's name, they'd start telling truck stories
Just
about
one of those guys. Yeah.
Nino was he wasn't married at the time, and he rode into Fort Worth during the Depression years in the 30s, and there at the yards in Fort Worth, and I've been to that place right there where those trains would come in and unload, and right there at that yard, there would be a bunch of African-American ladies of the evening waiting for those love-starved cowboys coming in, right?
Yeah.
And they told the story of Nino going in there, you know, and I think they'd give him about $3 for the trip, you know. He'd keep him in his little satchel here and a few tacos, you know, to come for the whole trip.
Right.
And he wouldn't gamble with the damn railroad people. They were all largos. Largos means crooks, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, Nino, they came up there, and all these ladies came out there pretty well painted, you know, and everything. And they were making signs to him. I can imagine. I better not make those signs to you, but they were making it clear what they were offering him.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, sure.
And Nino, and the story is Nino told on. So he les pregunté qué tanto. He said, how much? You know, and one of them said a quarter. A quarter.
Yeah.
A quarter. Nino dice, me saqué el billete y me vi. Oh, come on, the whole bunch. That's his story. We always told that. He said, le dije, come on, the whole bunch. I got enough for everybody. I don't know how many there were, but he had enough quarters there. Oh, Nino. Another time, Dick Holbein, a good friend of mine, one of the Holbeins, one of the primos, you know, was working cattle. He couldn't find a cook. So he hired Nino. Well, Nino, he was about a fifth choice of the cook. Right. But he hired Nino to cook for his corrida. And Nino loved more than anything javelin. He loved javelin. You could give him a sirloin steak and he'd throw it away if it could get a javelin. When I was a little boy, we damn sure didn't shoot many javelin, but every year as a little boy, we had to shoot a javelin for Nino. And we'd take him a leg. Dad and I, gut damn thing, get the fleas off of us and take him a leg, you know, or two legs, a shoulder and a leg, or half it. Anyway, I just remember it very well. I remember the little house in Hebbronville where Nino lived with his sister, you know, when he was real old. He was real old. Wow. I guess I was 7 or 8, 9 years old. Anyway, but Nino loved javelin. It was just like giving him the most wonderful sirloin steak you ever saw in your life. Meat. Yeah.
Good for him.
He would come out, oh, qué bueno, Chale, ¿cómo le va? Chale, Bilito. You know, anyway, Dick Holbein, as a third choice, hired him for a cook. And Dick, at that time, Dick was on the wild ranch, the Palangana Ranch, on the wild ranch, and the corrida there were the Alarcones, nice, finest people, and Juanche Alarcon was the caporal, was the main man. What a fine gentleman. If you ever see that book, get a chance to look at that video, Vaquero, the Forgotten Cowboys, yeah, he's in that book.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, one of his sons, the sheriff, Kiko, is a sheriff. Anyway, my point is that Nino was in there making bread. Amasando is what you call it, amasando. He was making bread in the camp there at the Palangana. and Juanche or one of the cowboys rode up there, and they had roped a little javelin, and knocked it in the head with a quirt handle or something. Anyway, killed it, and they brought it in, and they went in and told Nino that we brought you una javelina. Oh, okay. When he dropped everything, he went outside. He hung it up, and gutted it, and skinned it, jerked the skin off, and left it hanging in the shade there, and then went back in to finish his job. Well, when all the corrida got through working in the pens, whatever they were doing, they were finished penning some cattle or something, and it was lunchtime, and so they all came in and sat down at the table. Palangana had a real nice camp there. They all sat down at the table, and they opened the bandeja, the pan with bread in it, and got the bread out, and the damn bread was blue. That bread was blue, and they told, and I imagine it was Juanche, very dignified man. Nino, ¿qué es eso?
What the hell is this?
And Nino, they looked, and he leaned over. Nino leaned over real serious to right in Juanche's face, and he said, "No like, no take." So that's an old saying. All our lives, when my dad, that's an old saying, all our lives, and our kids too, they'd say, I don't like that kind of, I don't like, no like it, no take it.
No take
yeah,
it.
Yeah. You don't like it, no
It's
take
your
it.
choice.
Yeah, and I got over there's a pan. Over there's in my bread, in the pan that we'll have after a while. It's a lady sent me a paño, a towel, and it says on there, you don't like it, no take it. Yeah.
That is excellent.
Yeah. But anyway, Nino had a lot of, we had some story fun about Tio Nino.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, fun about Tio Nino on there.
Not to change the subject, but I had told you earlier that that my family was from, well, my grandmother and grandfather were in between Miranda City and Bruni.
Yeah.
Is where they lived. They're on Highway 359.
Yeah.
And we found out earlier, I've got some uncles that you knew. You knew my uncle, A.B. Dickens, from there in Hebbronville.
I certainly do.
Otto Dickens was in Falfurious.
Certainly do, yeah.
And really neat that you knew some of my family there. Because you were there during I guess a little bit before your lifetime, but South Texas went from all cattle, all cowboy, to oil field.
That's right.
And so all of a sudden you had a kind of a combination of interests there. My family wound up there because of the oil field. Grandpa drilled water wells.
Exactly.
His daddy invented that water well jackup rig.
Yeah.
And that's how all the kids from Miranda City area went to A&I and became petroleum engineers. That was the biggest petroleum engineering school in the country, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's just a side note, but it's interesting that during your lifetime, it kind of went from all cattle to a whole lot of oil field and a lot of crossover in between.
Certainly more so in my dad's lifetime too, because you know as I said, so when Dad came out in 1946, Dad was out of the Army. Or the Army, and Uncle Dana had already been in business there, and Uncle Dana had all these plans for the young soldier to come, you know, and Uncle Dana was, I guess, like a kind of overbearing brother, you know, and was in a hurry to get him going and everything, and they formed Helen and Helen to try to keep my grandfather's ranches together and stuff like that, but Uncle Dana and Dad bought the local trucking company, which cattle hauling business, and they built a building down Main Street, and he did a lot of things, you know, together, and they tried to run their cattle together. And I remember as a boy them raising hell with each other that I'm going to cut my cattle out of that herd. And your cattle will be left there, but I'm gonna do the cutting. And Uncle Dana, no, I'm doing the cutting, you know. So anyway, I remember that as a little boy.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, but it didn't last long until they decided to divide up. And, they ended up buying some property together, and then they partitioned, you know.
Sure.
On their deal there.
Yeah. Natural.
But the oil field when they first came, my Uncle Dana leased the country there. If I'm not wrong, the name of the ranch is the ranch land was Jaboncillos. There's other Jaboncillos ranches, but this one is right there at Miranda City, near Miranda City, and the little village is Los Abuelos.
Yes, sir.
So a lot of people call the whole ranch the ranch Los Abuelos Ranch. That is not true. That is not true. The ranch is, I believe, is Jaboncillos, but the village is Los Abuelos, where the spring is there.
Yeah, that's where my grandfather went to school, was at Los Abuelos. Right there at Oilton.
So Uncle Dana leased the Los Abuelos, and then Dad and they had. And then he had leased the Albercas, right? Las Albercas. Las Albercas is on farther south, there on what is now 649 down there, and right off to the west side of there, and Las Albercas. And that's kind of my earliest memories of being in of being with my dad and being horseback is the very earliest time there. So it had to be 49, 50 or something like that. And Dad was in the trucking company. They had the Armstrongs, the Armstrong family, Tobin, John, and their sister had leased a big ranch, which is now the Wyatt Ranch there out of Hebbronville. They had leased that big ranch years ago, and were running cattle, crossbred cows there. And then something happened over in Kennedy County. Maybe Tom, some patriarch passed away or something, and they ended up buying the Partición Ranch where Captain Bill had later did, and I don't know who took over I think it was somebody named Miller at that time that took over where Oscar Wyatt is now, and so that ranch has changed hands several times.
Yes, sir.
The point I wanted to make is that my dad ended up borrowing the money and buying a bunch of those cows. And I grew up with them, and they were called the Armstrong cows. They were big old Brahman cross cows, Brayford cows, big cows. And that's what he stocked the Las Albercas ranch with.
Like a tiger stripe kind of cattle, huh?
They were. That's correct. They were. But they were big old cows, you know, and big old Brahman looking horns and stuff. I know because we got some of the horns on the wall in what we call our museum, an old barn.
Right.
But anyway, the point I want to make is that that's my earliest memories there, and guess what happened about 1950, 51, just as young whippersnapper was getting going and everything, is the damnedest drought you ever saw in your life hit, you know, and it's all borrowed money, everything borrowed money, you know, and so it just broke Dad, and my grandfather let my dad have the Mota at the time, let him have it, the Mota, and so I don't know if it grazed out or not. But anyway, we had to remove the horses and we had those cows. And I distinctly remember driving as a young boy, driving drags, you know, those cows down that Hobsonville Road, we called it at the time. And that was eventually became 649.
Aguilar's Highway.
Yeah, and then we turned there on 3073, what is now 3073, you know, through the gravel hills there, through the Miranda Valley, turned off and went through the Martinez Ranch and then through the Vela Ranch and then on to the Mota. And those are the earliest years I remember at the Mota. So
great memories.
Yeah,
that's great.
We had this Jack Armstrong, one of the Armstrong Yeager Barfield family that we're so close to. Jack Armstrong was a young teenager at the time, and I was so hot and darn sunburned, a little old kid riding along there, and old Jack would ride up beside me and say, he talked real high, would you like to have some iced tea with, you can just see that rattling around that ice in there, and it just weeping. Wouldn't that be good? And I just remember that. I remember Jack Armstrong telling me
Tease you a little bit.
His daughter, I'll get on Facebook with her.
Oh yeah.
And I'll tell her all those stories.
Oh, that is great.
I tell her stories about Jack.
Good for you.
Which I have many other stories
right.
about Jack Armstrong.
Sure.
He turned into a got a job as a tick rider.
A rider? Yeah.
Down there.
Well, those guys were Western.
Huh?
Those guys were Western.
Yeah, they were. Well, Elva's dad ranched about 9,000 acres down there right on the lake. And of course, we'd see Jack pretty regularly, you know.
Yeah.
And Elva and I were young married. And Elva and I was with my father-in-law down there. We parked at an Exxon station there. And here came Jack buying the country in the government old Dodge, yellow Dodge, and pulling a yellow trailer, single horse trailer in it. And Jack lived toward Hebbronville. He lived on what's now 16 toward Hebbronville, and like he's going down 83, going south or going upriver. Mm-hmm. And old Jack saw us there, and he wanted to turn around and say something to my father-in-law about something. And the old horse. The funniest thing was his old horse, he had an old gray horse that was standing in that trailer, open top, one horse trailer, mm-hmm. And hit the horse, I guess, about shoulder high. And when Jack, the horse was already leaning, ready to go home, which was this way, and Jack went the other way, and the horse turned upside down in the damn trailer, and you could just see his forelegs kicking up there. That damnedest squealing and hollering and you ever saw in your life. So I just love to tell that story.
That is funny.
I love to tell that story to his daughter.
Yeah, heck yeah.
Yeah, about that story.
Well, man, I really appreciate you sharing all this great information and history. It's so fun. I really enjoy it.
Well,
I know you do too. You're lucky to have lived all that.
We got a lot of stories, yeah. I just love this. I love the ranch history.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I pay attention to other people's stories. I enjoy listening to the stories you you record. What a wonderful thing you're doing
Well,
there.
we just like to keep these stories alive, you
Yeah,
know. And,
that is so good.
like I told somebody else, if we don't tell our own stories, somebody else will tell it for us, and they'll probably screw it up.
We need to tell it the way we want it told. That's exactly right. Yeah, and get it right.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thank you so much for having us today. Again, I'm really appreciative of you sharing all your knowledge and your history, and you're a blessed man to have lived that life, I tell you. And
It's my pleasure, Mark.
yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thanks for having us in your home.
Thank you, and thank Matt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And folks, thank you for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed this. We may get together and do it again someday. But like I always say, remember, life's always better when there's dirt under your feet.